Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special and very magical hour that we're going to have together. It's called Connect with the Magic of Your Ancestral Mothers. Access the unconditional love you crave for support, security, and self-acceptance. My name is Stephen Dinan, and I'm truly delighted to be with you here, getting to explore some fascinating terrain with a really innovative teacher that just came to Shift last year. We loved working with her. She's back for more. We're going to share a little bit about a new program she's teaching towards the end of the hour. Her name is Perdita Finn. She's an author and a co-founder of the Way of the Rose, which is a non-denominational international fellowship. And she's, I think, a really bold and innovative explorer of subtler levels of reality and our connections to each other across divides. And we're going to cover some really cool territory today. So with that said, Perdita, thank you so much for coming back and joining us again.
Oh, thank you, Stephen, for having me back. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. I think the people I've met through Shift, someone recently said to me, I feel like there's certain places I go where we're all from the same zip code of our souls. And that's what I feel like when I'm at Shift, Oh, this is where my soul lives. So thank
Nice. We feel that way as well. And we're super excited about your upcoming program, which is all about the magic of your ancestral mothers. And it connects to the theme of today. But so let's dive, first of all, into your personal backstory. And love to hear a little bit about this whole notion of ancestral mothers and widening that a bit so that we actually have a different, I believe you call it root system, that we're able to tap into for our well-being and health and spiritual transformation now.
Well, in spiritual circles, we often talk about the God-shaped hole that a lot of people feel within them, and that yearning for something more mystical, more profound, more caring and loving. But I often think it's a mother-shaped hole. And I think a lot of us are feeling an absence of mothering in a way that we have a hard time talking about. I know that I certainly did. And I was thinking, about coming into this conversation, I was thinking how I define my life sort of, BC and AD, BC being before children and AD after diapers, right? And it really shifted. Before children, I was having a lot of interesting spiritual experiences. I was involved in a Zen community, a Buddhist community. I was very involved with the liberation theology movement and with a lot of radical Catholic activists in the nuclear freeze movement, and was, going to Tibetan retreats and drumming retreats and all kinds of things. And then I had children. And I suddenly found myself, wherever I went spiritually, in the back room babysitting all the kids to make sure they didn't get in the way. And this happened to me in a Buddhist monastery. I write about this in my book, Take Back the Magic. I was invited by the Zen master to meditate with my baby, my second child. And I was really adept. I could nurse with him. I could meditate with, full zazen with a snuggly. And if he woke up, I would just nurse him. And, he woke up and nursed and cooed. And I was kicked out of the Zendo at the end. I was told I was disrupting everyone's meditation. And that was my real Kensho, my real enlightenment moment where I said, what are we doing here? What are we doing with life and death? If this is a distraction from what we're doing, this should be everything that we're doing. And so I left Zen, actually, formally broke with my teacher and found myself in the Episcopal Church, where as an ex-atheist, ex-Buddhist pagan, I was teaching Sunday school in the back room with everybody else's kids again. The same thing happened. And then my husband and I left. And I found myself as a young mother. My own mother was dying and living with me, demented. I had young children and working full time at home, but working full time with kids. I'm sure this is a common story for many people here, many young parents. And there was no spiritual support system. And I found myself going, what's the matter? Why are we living like this? Why there was a yearning for the mother. And that began my journey back to find out what's gone so wrong that we so isolate mothers and children spiritually. And what has happened, how has the mother become exiled, demoted, in religious traditions around the world? This led to a long, long journey. And in the beginning of it, I found myself praying for, I said, like, I wish there was a group called Mothers Without Borders, without religion, without ideology, where we would all support each other. And it came about that I helped found a community 13 years ago with my husband, 13 years ago on June 16th, devoted to the mother by any name you want to call her. And people have come from all over the world to that community with that longing. People from all different religious traditions, Christian, Jewish, Wiccan, Muslim, Hindu, all different kind of religious traditions. And what they want is to experience the care, not of a judgmental father god, but a loving and consoling mother goddess. And maybe not just one mother goddess. You know, if you go back in any of the traditions around the world, Stephen, you find not a singular mother goddess, but when you leave monotheism behind and go back, you always find many, many mother goddesses. Among the Kogi people of Colombia, they have the 9 ancestral mothers. Among the indigenous people of Iceland are the 9 mothers. In India and Hinduism, we see the many manifestations of Durga from 9 to 108. And then we even see among the Greeks, the 9 muses, always 9. Why 9? Of course, because we're pregnant for 9 months, and that feels like a holy number to us as human beings. But it's never just one mother, it's many mothers showing up behind a singular God, because mothers know that you need Mothers Without Borders. You need many, many people showing up to help with this business of raising children and bringing them into the world in a lot of different ways. Now, I'm going to talk a lot in this course about mothers and the ancestral mothers, but for our deepest ancestors, that word wasn't gendered. In fact, that was a word, father is a very recent word. Men and women understood themselves as mothers, and people with children and without children understood themselves as mothers, as carers of the kin of a community. And so we're going to explore very different understandings of what it means to connect with our ancestral and our divine mothers. I think when we can begin to call them in, we can begin to get the mothering that we need so that we can be the mothers the world needs us to be, whether we're men or women, whether we have children or not.
So many beautiful reflections in there. And I want to go back to what you said, that do we have a sort of a mother-sized whole, that where we're seeking God. So often it's like the mother is it's the microcosm of the larger divine intelligence. So she is holding that energy for us. And so if we don't actually connect with that authentic mothering, it's like we can't really connect with the all or the whole. So maybe share a little bit about, like, how do you start to uncover the sort of the whole, the traumas, the wounds, and then be able to tap into this larger field of ancestral mothering that can really help heal things?
I'll tell you how it began for me in a very intimate story, Stephen. I was a new mother. I had a 2-month-old baby daughter, and I went home to visit my own mother who was dealing with chemotherapy. And she and I had a knockdown, drag out fight because she said to me at the end of dinner, put the baby down. And I put the baby down, and then she started to cry. And my mother said, let her cry. And I said, you don't let a baby cry. You teach a baby that when they cry, they get answered. That's, and she's, my mother was English. You're taught, suck it up. And it was a really big fight for us. And I said, it took me a long time to believe that I could cry and hear those cries answered by the divine because of the child rearing I experienced. And I think a lot of people had this experience. It was a big fight, but it was such a bad fight that I found myself screaming at my mother, holding my daughter crying. And I went down to call my husband, who had been a Rinzai Buddhist teacher. And he'd actually left Buddhism at that point, so appalled by the sexual and financial scandals. But he did have a few tricks up his sleeve. And I called him up and I was shaking and I said, Clark, help me. And I feel like I got to get out of here. I'm so mad at my mother and I don't know what to do. And he said, you need a mantra. And I said, oh, I don't need a mantra. I need help. He said, you need a mantra. Get a piece of paper and a pencil. And I've got a crying baby in my arms. This is the old days with the old fashioned rotary phone. And so I get my piece of paper and pencil. And he says, I'm giving you this mantra for a Buddhist deity who can guide you through crossroads of problems. Just say this mantra. And he gave me the Jizo Dharani. Jizo is a bodhisattva of compassion from Japanese folk tradition. And the mantra goes, Onka ka kabisama e soa ka. Onka ka kabisama e soa ka. And my husband said to me, go say it in the dark. Just say it with the baby and ask for help, and maybe peace will descend between you and your mother. So I went down into the darkened living room, my baby crying, and I began to soothe her. And I just held on to this mantra like a cord through a labyrinth, trying to find my way through anger and grief and upset feelings about my own experiences of being a daughter, my own terrors about being a mother. And as I said this mantra, Onka ka kabisama e soaka, I felt in the windows all around me, women looking in, mothers in my ancestral experience, unhappy mothers, defeated mothers, unhappy daughters, just the whole legacy of trauma in my family's story. And it felt heartbreaking, but very real. And eventually my spirits calmed. And the baby was asleep. And I carried her upstairs and I put her down. And I went into my mother's bedroom and she was crying softly. And when I walked into her bedroom, I realized that the whole wall opposite her bed had become a kind of ancestor altar. And there were the faces of all the women, the grandmothers, the great-grandmothers, the aunts, the cousins that were part of that history, the very women I had felt looking in. And I realized that my mother and I weren't alone, that we had resources that I didn't even understand. And on that night, I reached out for my mother's hand and we held each other. And we realized that we weren't alone in our relationship and that the dead were with us. Now, I have a very profound relationship with the dead that began on that night, Stephen. I began calling on those ancestors for help, and they began actively showing up for me. I've written about this in my book, Take Back the Magic. And I began calling as a young mother on those ancestral grandmothers for help. And they began showing up for me. Over the decades, that has transformed my entire experience of reality. To finish the story, Jizo, the little bodhisattva my husband gave me to pray to, and he looks like a little monk, and he carries a little staff, and he's holding a jewel in his hand near his heart. And he's often left at the crossroads by women who've had abortions to help the souls of their aborted souls they've said no to find a better rebirth. And so they're often left in Japan. It's a way of the beautiful ritual for honoring abortion in Japan. But I got fascinated by Jizo, this bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is a being who pledges themselves to the salvation of all beings. And the folk story is that Jizo had not always been a monk and not always been a man. That in a much earlier incarnation, Jizo had been a girl who had a terrible relationship with her mother. They fought all the time. And then they were in the middle of a fight. Her mother died and went to hell for her crimes. And Jizo felt terrible about what happened to her mother. So she went to Buddha and she said, Buddha, take me to hell to take my mother's place in hell so she doesn't have to be there anymore. So Jizo journeyed to hell. And when she got there, she couldn't find her mother. And she said to Buddha, "Where's my mother?" And the Buddha said, "The moment you wished for your mother to be out of hell, she was no longer there." And Jizo said, "I pledge myself to all beings everywhere to be liberated from suffering and to help every soul, every mother and daughter to heal." My husband didn't even know that story when he gave me the mantra.
Well, what an amazing story, and very much a bodhisattva ideal and a mothering ideal to sort of commit yourself to the alleviation of suffering of all beings like that. And so I'm wondering, since that's a pretty powerful gateway you had with that mantra with Jizu and the sort of the opening, like, have you found that that particular mantra, or are there a lot of different pathways to open up this palpable sense of connection to this whole field of many, many, many mothers?
That was just the beginning. And I don't even say the Jizo mantra very much anymore. Actually, no, I do say it. My husband and I have taken to starting to say it in the morning. We do so many different prayers, so many different mantras from so many different traditions. We all have our own song, and that song comes from the karmic long story of our souls. There's certain resonances with certain prayers. I sometimes think that mantra is memory. It's what connects us to very old memories in our souls. So everyone's going to have, one of the things I always tell people is that we all have different prayers that work for us and that summon for each of us the ancestors in different ways.
Okay, well, let's dive into some of those sort of practical ways that we can start to open this portal for ourselves beyond just the Jizu mantra.
Sure. Well, I think one of the things that we begin to do, we in the beginning, when we were talking before we began, you talked about lineages. And when we think about our ancestors, there's a lot of talk these days about ancestral lineages, right? And unfortunately, we don't have ancestral lineages. There are very few straight lines in the natural world. Most lines in the natural world curve and turn. The moon turns in its cycles, the sun turns in its seasons, and rivers wind their way, their water cycles, their spirals and cycles and turning. But there are very few straight lines. And we don't really find straight lines as an idea among human beings until we start plowing straight lines into the fields to control the means of production. And then we start recording the means of production with numbers and writing and creating straight lines of sentences. And then we have ideas of ownership. And lineages are really ideas of ownership. So-and-so begat so-and-so, begat so-and-so, begat so-and-so. And it's usually about which fathers own which children, which patriarchs own which property. And yet we all know that, in fact, parenting can be much more complicated and much more entangled than that. And we find in indigenous communities not ideas of lineage, but of ideas of belonging and connection. If our listeners were to imagine their own circle of biological relatives, you have a mother and a father, right? But your mother and father have a mother and father. And each mother and father has a mother and father. And each of those mothers and fathers has a mother and a father and a mother and a father and a mother and a father and a mother and a father, right? And that's just parents. If we go at 6 or 7 generations, you're not going to have a straight line anywhere on your piece of paper. You're going to have a mess. You're going to have a mess of mothers and fathers. Now, if we add in other children and cousins and siblings and unmarried aunts, it's going to get really messy and entangled. What we really have behind us ancestrally are not lineages of domination and power, but root systems of belonging that root us into the earth and help us belong to the very land we live upon. Last night we had a huge windstorm where I live, and a tree got uprooted, and you saw that root system come up, and all those roots entangled with each other and coming around each other. And there also were the fungal systems weaving in and out. That's what our ancestors are like. They're like a big root system. And that root system is where we draw our energy from, our water, our food up from. And so part of what we do, what I want people to learn to do is to use their ancestors. We've come to think that we need to heal our ancestors, and we don't. Our ancestors are dead. They're done. They're fine. We need healing, and our ancestors are ready to heal us. And one of the things I've learned from my many decades of working with the dead, people often say to me, like, what happens when we die? I think one of the things that happens when we die is our perspective shifts. We see the big picture, the long story. We see that we've all been each other's mothers in many, many lifetimes past. And I think for some people, that's a way of living when they're alive. And for some people, that's a revelation when souls, that's a revelation when they die. But those souls are eager to help us. They are eager to show us how much they love us. And I always say, I don't saint anyone alive, not even the Dalai Lama, good as he is. No saint. He's just a human being like everybody else. And he's also the head of a corporation. So there are all the problems that come with that. That's the truth. He's not a saint. But everyone, every soul on the other side of the veil is a saint. Every soul on the other side of the veil is a mother of the living. And they are ready to show up for us, like Kuan Yin's 1,000 hands, to help us with the day-to-day worries and cares of our lives. And that is a really, we begin to feel ourselves circled by belonging, circled by care from those mothers on the other side. Now, how to summon them, how to relate to them, how to name them, that's a kind of long, slow business of finding out how we begin to relate to them on a day-to-day way. But they are there for us, as surely as they were there for me that night I had the fight with my own mother.
Well, I'd love to go further into how to summon them, how to invite them in, this sort of whole notion of sort of weaving this vast presence of mothering and intelligence and saintly wisdom from the other side into our daily lives. So, it sounds like there's some kind of prayers and activations you can do. What are you doing sort of in the course of your day to sort of presence and invoke and summon?
There are two things I do with my day, and if this is the moment, I'd love to share a visualization that I can do with it. But
sure,
first,
that'd be great. That'd be great.
First, let me just share with you my morning, how it begins. So my husband and I, our children are now grown, which means that they give us more worry than ever. Bad news, that kids give you just more worries the older they get. And we begin our morning worrying and fretting about our children, about our cars, about our house, about our animals that are aging, about our community, so many things to fret about. And we summon the ancestors to help us with our day-to-day problems. We call them in. We call in all those ancestral mothers by name, and we summon them in all different kinds of ways. I'm going to share everybody what to do with in a minute. And then we experience relief from our anxieties because we feel like we're not carrying them on our backs by ourselves. We have other hands on the other side holding us. So what I'd like to imagine, I'm sure our listeners are familiar with the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty, whether it's the Disney version or the French version. But, this story of Sleeping Beauty is an iconic story. It goes very, very far back. But for people who don't remember it, there are a king and queen who have a baby, a daughter called Aurora. And they summon the fairies to her christening party. It's going to be a big christening party with all the royalty at the castle, but they also invite the fairies to come and to bless the baby. Sometimes we know the fairies as the fae, but the fairies or the fae was just a way about talking about ancestors who were so old, so far in the distant past that we might not know their names. Those magical beings from the other side are simply the mothers and grandmothers from our stories past. And they summon those fairy godmothers to come and circle the baby's bassinet. And each fairy godmother brings a different gift to the child. Someone brings her beauty, another brings her a beautiful singing voice, another promises her love, another promises her good health. They each have different gifts to bring. They don't bring the same gift. They each bring different gifts. What I'd like listeners to imagine, if you just shut your eyes for a minute, is imagine yourself as that child, that beloved child in that cradle or bassinet, surrounded, encircled by ancestral fairy godmothers. Who are they? Maybe one of them's a great grandmother whose name you have heard. Maybe one you don't even have a name for. You can just see her coming from eons past, from far, far away. Maybe some of them aren't even human. Maybe some of them fly to the bassinet or crawl over, lumbering over like bears to the bassinet. But imagine yourself circled by 7 or 9 or 13 of these mothers, these fairy godmothers. And let yourself see each one as distinct and different, each with a different gift to offer you each and every day. There is a fairy godmother to take care of your car. There is a fairy godmother to take care of your children, each of your children, all of your children. There is one to take care of your body. There is another to tend your relationship. There's another one to help you make the phone calls you don't want to make. Who are the mothers that you need throughout your day? They're not all the same mother. You know, in the Disney movie, they are all a different color. There's a pink fairy godmother and a blue fairy godmother and a yellow fairy godmother. But these are your fairy godmothers, and you get to call in whoever you want just to see them. And the oldest way to summon them in the fairy tales is by name. Call them by their name. Whether it's your great grandmother from Ireland, if you know her name, my grandmother Catherine, I call her in. Maybe it's an old woman and you want to call her, you want to just call her Granny. Whatever they are, give them each a name and call them by their names. Whether there's 7 names or 9 names or 13 names, they are circling you. They are there to help you each and every day. And they are real. They are really there. This isn't a made-up abstraction. These mothers have been praying for you for lifetimes. They have been watching out for you for lifetimes. And one of those mothers is there to remove curses. We'll talk about curses later, but you know, if you feel like you got a curse on you, know that there is an expert at curse removal showing up at that bassinet. And you can call on that mother too. And some of those mothers aren't even women. Some of them are men. Some of them are men who are mothers, like Saint Anthony or Saint Christopher, who hold that child so lovingly and close to them. Or like men in your lives, you know, my gay male friends I lost to AIDS were some of the best mothers I ever had, and I surround myself with them. I call upon them when it feels like I'm in dire need physically. Who are your mothers? They don't have to just be women. They don't have to just be biological ancestors. You can feel those ancestors coming in. There may be someone you have a profound connection to, a saint from the other side, a figure from the other side. Suddenly you want Janis Joplin in to come and help you sing. She can be one of your fairy godmothers. You get whoever you want from the other side of the veil. That's what it means to be a fairy. It means to be from the other side of the veil. And I want you right now to set an intention with one of those mothers. Ask for them for something. Ask for help. Cry and know that your cries will be answered. You won't be left to cry it out. Your cries will be answered. You will be picked up and held by one of those mothers. What do you want to ask for that feels impossible, that feels too hard for you to do it on your own? Make eye contact with that mother and ask. Cry, stamp your foot, throw a temper tantrum, and know that that mother can hold it. I have a lot of things I'm asking for right now. And here's what I want to ask from you when you do this. Tell me what magic happens in your life. Every day, ask that mother to show up for you. And then please let me know. I'm easy to find in all different kinds of ways. Tell me about the magic that happened for you, because it's going to happen. Not only is the curse going to be removed from Aurora, she's going to find her beloved and her true love. She's going to be reunited with everyone she loves. Healing, love, the mothers are waiting to bring it through. Stephen, can you tell me who one of your fairy godmothers is?
More of a felt sense. It's like, it's a sense of the lineages. I have like some Irish lineage and sort of that part of the world. And I feel like there's like connection points. I've connected more with the father line in different things. And I was just kind of getting more of that feeling of the magical, kind of more playful qualities in that side rather than a specific name or identity yet.
You'll know their names. Some of those old Irish biddies are very powerful. I have a bunch of them. You can probably tell from looking at me. I got a lot of them.
Yes, you're incarnating them right now. Great. How important is it? So it's important to kind of start to be able to really create real relationships with identified mothers to sort of deepen this connection, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of ways to do that. You probably see behind me my ancestor altar that I have photographs of them.
Mm-hmm.
I have over here my grandmother Molly Ireland, from Ireland, of course. And she was a very stingy, she had 6 kids in the Depression and no money, right? So she saved everything, every bit of string, every bit of wire, every button, and she'd put them in mason jars in her basement. But the other thing she saved, Stephen, was wishbones from chickens. She would
Wow.
wash it, she'd clean them, and she'd chuck them in a jar. But she never gave them to any of the grandkids. She never gave them to anybody. They were just there in a jar. And so I started collecting wishbones in front of Grandma Molly. And you want to hear the prayer I wrote for her? I wrote a prayer to her that I say every morning. It's just a little old Irish lady, right? In the name of the sun, the seed, the soil, and the sea, Molly Finn, you are so much more than you seem to be. Go into your basement and open the jar. Grant me my wishes from near and from far.
Wow.
I say that's my summoning spell to her every morning. And
Wow.
she and I are having a blast together.
That gives me chills because you've almost turned what could be something you're just kind of like, oh, she was just a hoarding from this, but you turn it almost like she was like saving these wishbones for all future generations, and you can tap
exactly right. She was collecting the magic that we were going to need at a later date.
That's a really great way to reframe. And so is that an important part of this process too, is like aspects of our lineage that we might have ambivalence around or judgment around, that we're sort of kind of pivoting or reframing what they might have been up to?
Absolutely. We're going to do a lot of re-narrativizing, retelling of the stories of these mothers and grandmothers, because, one of the problem is we've come to think that, for instance, I had a grandmother who was in it. My grandmother Nellie, was in and out of mental hospitals with electric shock for depression. That's all I knew about her. And, the depressed the depressed woman in and out of hospitals. I discovered her journal after she died. She was an extraordinary woman. She wrote a daily journal her entire life. She had a lot to be depressed about. She had lost her love in World War I. She had been, she hadn't been able to have a job. Many awful things happened to her, from rape to, she had a lot of reasons for not being in a good mood. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, I got it. And in the midst of it all, she gardened. She founded the Long Island Garden Club. She was supposed to be a magical gardener. And no one ever talked about about her with me. She wrote about her gardening every day. It's extraordinarily beautiful writing about plants, which she loved. She was a witch, I think, and she'd never have called herself that. And I call on her to be the gardener of my soul. I call upon her. And when I feel depressed or worried or anxious, I know she can show up and get me through it. Because she's seen the worst. She's seen the bottom of spirit, and she knows how to get you up. Another example would be, a lot of times we think that people who have had lives of terrible suffering, we have to heal them. But we don't really understand those lives from the perspective of the short story of a single lifetime. And sometimes there are souls who live lives of tremendous suffering so that they can be with others inside of that suffering. So for instance, I have a friend whose mother was a terrible alcoholic when we were growing up. She died of alcoholism. And she never got better. She never hit bottom. She never, AA didn't work, nothing worked. Even though she was beautiful and wonderful and talented, she drank herself to death. It's a terrible story, right? 3 years ago, Stephen, I decided I had to get sober from sugar if I wanted to be the great grandmother I dream of being, right? I'm going to have to, my kids aren't even dating yet. I better start taking care of myself. I have to quit sugar. And I'm a real sugar addict. And I tried a lot of different ways to do it. Nothing had worked. And I began calling on Rita, my friend's mother. I said, Rita, you did not get sober. You did not live to hold your grandchild. Please help me get sober from sugar. Help me claim the longevity I want. And she did. 3 years sober sugar. I have her picture over here. She's my sponsor on the other side, and she's tough.
Wow. You have amazing stories, and I think it's
I'm
really
a storyteller.
it's also just really helps you see how this pivot from seeing sort of a problem or a tragedy or a lack and turning that into part of that soul's blessing that you can then tap into. That's a really beautiful reframing and reorientation.
And we don't know, sometimes there's souls who've only come. We have soul appointments with souls that only come for a moment, right? That they don't stay very long. And that's very heartbreaking. But just because their lives are short doesn't mean their souls aren't mighty and they don't want to connect with us in really powerful ways. So one of the things I want to show people is all the different kinds of mothers available to us from the other side, and the different kinds of mothering. We all need different kinds of mothers. We don't need one mother. I mean, here's the thing. Wouldn't it be great to have 13 different kinds of mothers? One day you've got the mother who says, you are the best, you're amazing, I love you. And the next day you have the mother who says, clean up your room. You want both.
So when you're tapping into all this field of all the potential mothers, you're fairly equal opportunity, like if it's a mother of a friend or mother of a, so you can start to tap into people that are much wider than our own ancestral root system, it sounds like.
The story of our souls is a very long story through deep time. And one thing our ancestors knew, the wonderful writer you might know, Tyson Yunkaporta, he's an Aboriginal elder from Australia. And he wrote a beautiful book called Sand Talk. And he says in his culture, your great grandmother is also your child. We're all being born and reborn to each other again and again and again. We have all been each other's mothers. we have all been each other's children. But what does it mean to really live with that knowing? If we really lived with that knowing, we would never drop another bomb on another person.
Mm.
If we really lived with that knowing, we would not want anyone to go hungry. If we really lived with that knowing, we would live very, very differently on this earth. And that's why this work feels very urgent to me at this moment in time, Stephen. I think it transcends ideology, transcends all isms, to really understanding what it means to be a soul entangled with all other souls.
So beautifully shared. Yes. And I want to sort of bring us back around to this whole notion of like filling the hole that we feel day-to-day life. There might be a lack of unconditional love or support or some sort of nurturance or some quality that we didn't get from our biological mothers, or apparently so. Then how do you then just sort of like specifically kind of access the ancestral mothers to help with that nurturance, with that healing in the moment?
One mother is not enough for anyone. One mother is not enough for anyone. You know, we have this catchphrase, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. But we've forgotten what that means. We've forgotten that it means it takes a village in which every single person in that village experiences themselves as the mother of every single child to raise a child. And everyone has to have that commitment. No one's getting enough mothering in our culture, particularly mothers aren't getting enough mothering. And so we have this kind of, everyone's talking a lot about generational trauma these days, right? Because we are the species that traumatizes itself. We don't see bluebirds traumatizing each other.
Mhm.
We don't see raccoons traumatizing each other. We see human beings traumatizing each other. And what is that fundamental trauma has been civilization's need to demote and marginalize the mother. And it's meant that nobody gets enough mothering. And it's, you know, the Surgeon General recently said that the worst epidemic in America is loneliness. People are really lonely. They don't feel cared for in their bodies. They don't feel cared for in their lives, in their communities. Communities have dissolved. How can we give ourselves the mothering we need so we can be mothers in the world? I mean, when I started to access the dead, these folks behind me, every photo you see up there, every single person on that altar has a job, Stephen. They are working for, you know.
Got quite a team.
Yeah, it's bigger than that. It's taking over the whole dining room. My husband says our whole house is going to be an ancestor altar. And it is, because ultimately the whole world is an ancestor altar. And that also, the land itself has been our mother. The trees have been our mother. The animals have been our mother. Everything we eat has been our mother. And when we really begin to know that, we feel such gratitude, such love, that we want to return those gifts to the world ourselves.
Beautiful. Well, Perdita, you're just a fountain of fascinating insights, and I love your stories too. Which really, I think each of your stories kind of bring alive a whole possibility of like it's like a shift in consciousness about how could you could enlist this particular challenge from an ancestor into a great blessing now, and that's really beautiful. So I want to spend some time now talking explicitly about your upcoming program, because I think it's such a unique way to dive into the healing of these ancestral root systems and access a really profound sense of mothering and specific skills and capacities to help us in day-to-day life. So the program that Perdita is going to be teaching is called The Magic of Your Ancestral Mothers. Access eternal love and support from your constellation of mothers for everyday miracles and deep healing. And you can find it at the URL ancestralmothers.com, ancestralmothers.com. It's a 7-week program. You don't have to have any specific background. It's just if you have a curiosity, a sense of like possibility, or a real, like your soul is tapping you on the shoulder, this is important, then you're warmly welcome to join. And Perdita, I'd love for you to start us off by share a little bit about your high-level intentions for this program. That what are people really going to come away with, and how does this really better their lives?
I'm a very practical, earthy person, Stephen, and I hope people have a really practical transformation of their everyday experience. I hope they really experience direct magic and miracles, and that they realize that every single day is easier with this help. That's what I want for people. I want for people to feel less anxious. You know, we live in a moment where it seems to me people are more and more frightened. They're frightened of so many different things, frightened of climate change, of course. We're feeling it like animals in our bodies, but of so many upheavals and changes. And what would it be like to let go of that fear and step into a place of faith and trust and know that we're being taken care of? How would that look on a day-to-day experience? How would it transform who we are in the world? I watch people's lives change when they start doing this work. They become really courageous. You know, miracles happen to them. So, and that this is in a practical way. This isn't like I came back and I have a new astral feeling about something. It's like, oh, I've learned an economy of prayer that's transformed my relationship to an economy of money. I can do stuff I didn't used to be able to do. I'm having fun in the world again.
Love it. So module 1 is called Reshape Your Connection with Yourself and the Earth Through the Body of the Mother.
Yeah. We're going to look at the bodies of our mothers as material beings. The word for matter, M-A-T-T-E-R, is the same as the word for mother in Latin, mater, M-A-T-E-R. And how do we re-enter the body of the world? You know, we've separated body, mind, and spirit, right? And we have privileged spirit over our bodies. But how do we re-enter our bodies, our own bodies, and the body of this earth, and experience it as loving and healing and non-traumatizing?
So module 2 is called Unleash Our Lady of the Beasts to Reclaim Joy and Pleasure.
Yeah, you know, when we start to feel we're going to liberate ourselves from anthropocentrism, we haven't just been human beings in past lives. We've also been animals and trees and fungi and fish. And we're going to learn, as our ancestors did, to summon the animal mothers, whether the hippo mothers or the hawk mothers, and we're going to summon them to help us think about what it means to live in our animal bodies again, live in our animal bodies with our appetites and our desires and our eros. How can they make us feel safe to want what we want and be who we are?
Module 3 is Empower Your Spiritual Practice with Our Lady of Sorrows.
We will look at some hard stuff. We're going to look at what's happened to the grandmothers and how they got disappeared and why they were disappeared and how we can call them back into the room.
Module 4, use the ancient maternal wisdom of the season of the witch to transform trauma into healing.
Many of us have ancestries of terrible, terrible trauma and violence, and we all experience it epigenetically in our bodies from the violence of the European gynocide in particular, but we'll also look about colonial injustices and violences as well. And yet, how can the very ancestors who experience these traumas be the ones to liberate us from them? We don't have to heal them. They know how to heal us.
Module 5, Embrace the Black Madonna for Creative Miracles.
People talk a lot about the Black Madonna. Who is she? Why do people all over the world create a mother with a face as dark as night and dark as the earth and turn to her for their deepest longings? We'll explore who she might be and how many different Black Madonnas there are, and how that we can invite them into our lives for magic of all kinds.
Module 6, Transform Your Relationships and Personal Growth with the Mothers of the World.
The way of the mother is very different than the way of civilization. I often say that the opposite of God is not goddess. The opposite of a monotheistic patriarchal God is not now a matriarchal goddess. The opposite of God is what my daughter calls the animate everything. Everything has been our mother. And suddenly there's not just one judgmental abstract being. that's a man or one woman on high. There is a plethora of ways to love and be loved.
Beautiful. And then finally, module 7, craft your legacy with the magic of the long story.
What does it mean to be a mother in the world? Whatever our biological situation, whatever our gender, what does it mean to create a world we want to be reborn into? You know, people talk about the 7 generations, but what if we knew we weren't going anywhere? What if we knew that we would be reborn into the world that we have made for ourselves? What's that going to look like?
Well, it's clear that people are going to get not only a lot of great information and practices, but also have a good time with you because you are a very magical being. So again, this whole program is laid out in detail at the URL ancestralmothers.com, ancestralmothers.com. So in addition to the 7 modules that we just described, and there's more detail on the page for those, you're also going to get a number of extra things, which really help you make best value of this over time. You're going to be able to first ask your questions live and have them addressed by Perdita. You'll get recordings for every session, both video and audio, as well as word-for-word transcripts. So you can really add this to your library and go back to it for specific stories, specific practices, and inspiration for years to come. There's also weekly exercises for home to deepen your practices, as well as a Facebook community to create community and really a network of sharing, a whole root system of mothering for you. On the page, you'll also see a number of extra bonuses that are designed to enhance your journey in different ways. There's a video dialogue with Perdita and Sophie Strand called Sophie Strand and the Animate Everything, which I guess you just referenced. You want to share a little bit about that mother-daughter dialogue?
Some of you may know my daughter. She's much more famous than I am. Her name is Sophie Strand, and she's the author of The Flowering Wand and The Madonna's Secret, and very popular writer about ecology. But in this conversation, we talk about what it means to retell the stories of our mothers. And my daughter wrote a book about the women who were written out of the Gospels and what their stories might have been. And to write that book, she went and studied the old texts very, very deeply, and also the ecology of Second Temple period Palestine. It's an extraordinary book. And we talk about what it means to reclaim the stories of our grandmothers. Our relationship also, which we talk about a little bit in that, you know, for mothers and daughters to heal with each other is really a revolutionary act in this culture. And we are determined to offer that healing to others.
That sounds like a great dialogue, and that's just one bonus. There's also a PDF excerpt from Perdita's upcoming book called Mothers of Magic, and I understand this is quite a unique bonus because it's not just a glimpse of coming attractions, it's actually an invitation. So you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I realized as I was putting this book together that I didn't want my voice and my stories to be the only voice and the only stories. The point of The Way of the Mother is that it's multiflora rose. There are many, many different voices. And so I am inviting collaborators for that project. So there is a piece that I'll be offering to read, and in it there's an invitation, and I'll be choosing 9 pieces to actually include in the book. And I have a form from my publisher for everyone to sign up and all of that. So I can't include everyone, but I will be choosing 9 pieces to include in the book that will be published by Running Press in 2026.
And then I also want to draw attention, there's one extra special bonus that folks get when you sign up by midnight tonight. And this is our way to really give you an extra encouragement to take the time after you're complete here to tune in, read the page, and really sense if this is the right next step for you. And if you get the sense to move forward today, you're going to get a video dialogue with Perdita and Sue Ellen Parkinson. This is called Envisioning the Ancestral Grandmothers. Can you share more about that?
You may have seen one of Sue Ellen Parkinson's icons. She does icons of female divinities, from Mary Magdalene to Bridget to Freya to the Black Madonnas. They're just extraordinary. In fact, one of her portraits graces my daughter's book, The Madonna's Secret, her extraordinary Mary Magdalene. Sue Ellen is herself one of, you know, your ideal grandmother. And she is going to share what it means to create and be in conversation with these ancestral mothers and bring them through to the world, and how alive they are. These are devotional objects she's creating. She gives a slideshow, Stephen, during this talk. And I had first thought we would do a talk, about 20 minutes long. We went for an hour because we couldn't stop. being with these. It is one of the most ecstatic visual journeys I've ever been on. Sue Ellen is a treasure, and her images are just going to blow your mind.
And sounds like if you need to adopt a grandma, she's a good candidate. So
Yes, indeed.
so that's a great extra bonus, and sounds like a lot of fun and profound information in terms of the ancestral grandmothers as well. So that's the special bonus if you sign up today. It's again called Envisioning the Ancestral Grandmothers. So the whole program is laid out in detail at ancestralmothers.com, and we've kept the investment very accessible. It's just 3 payments of $128, or you can save 10% if you pay in full with one payment of $349. The course is going to start July 30th and run Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Even if you can't make the live times, you can still get the full value with the recordings, transcripts, and the community as well. And I always encourage people to go to the page and read through the testimonials, and great stuff from Perdita's first program, unique approach to her topic, versatility, humor, and wisdom, blessing and delight. Gave voice to so many subtle and unspoken feelings I've had about working with my ancestors. I deeply love this class. There's really a sense of like just Perdita brings a lot of magic and a lot of commitment to your liberation and healing and full throttle living. So you're in for a treat and in for a blessed journey if you choose to move forward. And again, all the details are at ancestralmothers.com, and you'll get that special bonus when you sign up by midnight, which is Envisioning the Ancestral Grandmothers with Perdita and Sue Ellen Parkinson. So Perdita, always a joy to be with you. It's just a lot of fun and just really wise and deep and some magical ways. So thank you for this hour, and anything that's still on your heart you want to share with folks who are considering going further with you in the brand new program.
Well, I just hope people will come and we can have these conversations. And Stephen, I'm so grateful for everything that you're doing to shift the climate on this planet right now, which I think is a great, great deal. You know, as people become frightened, we need to create more and more oases of faith, places where people can feel safe, where we can offer people sanctuary from just the nuttiness that's all around us right now. So I'm so grateful for all that you're doing in the world. And I hope people will come and join me so that we can begin to help everybody feel a little better than they feel right now.
Amen to that. Well, thank you, Perdita, for a really wonderful hour. And thank you all for joining. And if you'd like to go further, you're warmly welcome to do so. And you can do so at ancestralmothers.com. And the course, again, is The Magic of Your Ancestral Mothers. Access eternal love and support from your constellation of mothers for everyday miracles and deep healing. So thank you so much. Many blessings.
Thank you.